The first wave of pain tore through me like molten iron poured directly into my spine, white-hot and unrelenting. I clawed at the dirt floor, my fingernails splitting against the hard-packed earth as a guttural moan ripped from my throat, half scream, half prayer swallowed by the thunder that shook the cabin's rotting walls. The taste of copper flooded my mouth where I'd bitten my lip, mixing with the salt of tears I couldn't afford to shed. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get to the story. I need you to understand something before this story really begins. I wasn't supposed to survive that night. The pack made sure of it when they left me in that rotting cabin with nothing but a broken lantern and the certainty of death. I was ready for it too, ready to let the pain take me, to slip away quietly like they wanted. But then he showed up. Cain Ashenblade, the Alpha King himself, crashing through my door like a force of nature, looking at me like I was worth saving. And everything I thought I knew about my life, about my place in this world, about what I deserved. It all shattered in that single moment when his golden eyes met mine and he said 5 words that changed everything: "They left you to die." Outside, the storm answered my agony with its own fury, rain hammering the roof in violent percussion. Just survive this, I told myself, the words barely forming in my fracturing mind. Just survive tonight, Melva. The Black Moon pack had dragged me here 6 hours ago. 6 hours since Alpha Garrick's decree echoed through the pack square, his voice cold and final as winter stone. "You will birth your mistake in exile, far from these walls. If you survive, you are no longer ours." They'd shackled my wrist with a silver chain of servitude one last time before shoving me through the forest, leaving me in this abandoned hunting cabin to either live or die alone. Tradition demanded a circle of she-wolves during labor. Protection. Guidance. The ancient songs of bearing life. But I had been stripped of tradition the moment I refused to terminate the alpha air growing inside me. My trembling hand found the silver chain still binding my wrist, its metal ice-cold against fevered skin. Through the haze of pain, I remembered my grandmother's voice from childhood: "True freedom, little one, is not given. It's taken, one broken chain at a time." I never understood her. Not until now, when everything had been ripped away. Using the jagged edge of a broken floorboard, I sawed at the chain until it snapped, the pieces falling away like shed skin. If death was coming for me tonight, I would meet it unchained. Another contraction seized me, stronger, deeper, and I doubled over, vision blurring at the edges. The lantern's flame guttered and danced, throwing grotesque shadows across the walls that seemed to writhe with mockery. The cabin groaned under the storm's assault, and for a moment, I couldn't tell where my pain ended and the world's chaos began. Then I heard it. A sound that wasn't thunder, wasn't rain, wasn't the creaking of old wood. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Approaching through the storm. They've come back. Terror crystallized in my chest, sharp as glass. Come to make sure I don't survive. To silence the scandal. I tried to rise, searching desperately for something, anything, to defend myself with. But my body betrayed me as another contraction crashed through like a tidal wave, dragging me under. My legs buckled, and I collapsed against the wall, gasping. The door exploded inward with a crack of splintering wood, and the wind surged into the cabin, extinguishing the lantern in one brutal breath. Darkness swallowed everything. All I could see was a silhouette framed by lightning, massive, towering, impossibly broad. The unmistakable presence of an alpha, but the scent was all wrong. This wasn't Black Moon. This wasn't anyone from my pack. The scent hit me like a physical blow, storm and ash and pine sap, wild and ancient, something that made every instinct in my wolf blood both recoil and ignite with recognition. No. It couldn't be. Cain Ashenblade. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories. The one they called the Crown Wolf. The one whose name was spoken in hushed reverence across 7 packs, a king who ruled with iron authority and whose enemies simply disappeared. "They left you to die," he said, his voice low and dangerous, each word deliberate as a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. Not a question. A statement of undeniable fact. I wanted to snarl, to show no fear, to prove I was more than this broken thing shivering on a dirt floor. But another contraction obliterated any pretense of strength, and a whimper escaped, small, helpless, damning. I hated him for witnessing it. Hated myself more. "Leave," I managed to gasp between ragged breaths, forcing the word past clenched teeth. "Just let me die without an audience." He stepped closer, and in the flicker of lightning through the broken door, I could finally see his face. Angular and severe, with high cheekbones carved from granite and a jaw that could have been forged by the gods themselves. His eyes gleamed molten gold, wolf eyes, even in human form, burning with an intensity that pinned me in place. Rain dripped from his black hair, plastered against his forehead and neck, and a wicked scar ran from his temple down to his collarbone, disappearing beneath the dark armor that hugged his frame like a second skin. Die. Something flickered across his features, rage perhaps, though not directed at me. His lip curled slightly, not quite a snarl. There is no honor in what they've done to you, Omega. Before I could protest, before I could summon the pride to refuse him, he was kneeling beside me, his massive hands moving with startling precision. He checked my pulse at my throat, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. He pressed the back of his hand against my forehead, assessing my fever. No alpha had ever touched me like this, clinically without disgust, without the underlying contempt that permeated every interaction in Black Moon. We Omegas were tolerated for breeding, for our ability to soothe volatile wolves during blood moons, but never treated as equals. Never touched with anything resembling respect. You're losing too much blood, he muttered, his voice dropping lower, softer, but still edged with command. The child is coming, and you're too weak. If I don't intervene, you'll both be dead within the hour. Shame burned through me, hotter than the pain, searing deeper than any contraction. I turned my face away, unable to meet those golden eyes. Then go, I whispered, voice breaking. No one asked you to witness my failure. His hand caught my chin, not gently, not cruelly, but with a steadying firmness that forced me to look at him. His grip was warm, grounding, demanding my attention despite the chaos trying to tear me apart. Is that what they told you? He asked, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made me feel stripped bare. That this is failure? I wanted to answer him, wanted to explain the shame that had been carved into my bones over weeks of condemnation. But before I could speak, before I could even form the words, my body seized again, this time different, more urgent, more final. The baby was coming. Kane's expression shifted, the question forgotten as he moved with swift, practiced efficiency. I need you to focus, Melva, he commanded, his voice cutting through my panic like an anchor. You're going to survive this. Do you understand me? And despite everything, despite the impossibility of this moment, despite the storm, despite the fact that an Alpha King was kneeling in the dirt beside a disgraced Omega, I found myself believing him. How did I end up here? The thought flickered through my mind even as another contraction built. How did everything fall apart so completely? The answer came in fragments, memories bleeding through the pain. I woke to warmth. Not the suffocating heat of fever or the burning ache of labor, but genuine warmth, the kind that seeped into bones that had forgotten what comfort felt like. My eyes fluttered open, and for a disorienting moment, I thought I'd died after all. Perhaps this was whatever came after, some gentle illusion before the void. But the pain in my body was too real for death. Dull now, manageable, but present, a reminder that I was still very much alive. The room around me was unlike anything I'd ever seen. High vaulted ceilings carved from dark stone, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns of wolves and moons that seemed to move in the flickering firelight. Thick furs covered the massive bed where I lay, silver wolf, black bear, something else I couldn't identify. The mattress beneath me was soft as clouds, a far cry from the straw-filled pallets of Blackman's Omega quarters. Tapestries depicting ancient battles hung on the walls, their colors still vivid despite obvious age. A fire roared in a stone hearth large enough to stand in, casting dancing shadows that felt protective rather than menacing. Through tall windows, I could see snow-capped mountains piercing a pale dawn sky. The northern fortress. I was in the Alpha King's stronghold. You're awake. The voice was female, gentle but brisk. I turned my head, too quickly, the room tilting, to see a woman approaching. She was perhaps 40, with silver-streaked auburn hair braided down her back and eyes the color of moss. She wore simple healer's robes, but carried herself with quiet authority. Easy now. You lost a significant amount of blood. Your body needs time to recover. My daughter, the words scraped out of my throat, raw and desperate. Sleeping peacefully in the nursery, she assured me, her expression softening. I've been checking on her every hour. She's strong, that one. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs that could wake the dead. A small smile touched her lips. She takes after her mother, I think. The relief nearly undid me. I closed my eyes, breathing through the sudden surge of emotion. Lyra. My daughter survived. I'm Ira, the woman continued, setting a tray on the bedside table. Steam rose from a clay cup, some kind of herbal tea, its scent earthy and restorative. Chief healer of the Northern Pack. I've been tending to you for the past 2 days. 2 days. I tried to sit up, but my arms trembled with the effort. Lie still, Ira commanded, her tone brooking no argument. She helped me prop against the pillows, her touch efficient but not unkind. You were barely conscious when the Alpha King brought you here. He carried you and your daughter through that storm himself, wouldn't let anyone else touch you. Nearly kicked down my door at midnight demanding I save you both. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the image of the fearsome warrior I'd met with someone who would carry a bleeding Omega through a tempest. Why would he? That's a question you'll have to ask him yourself, Ira said, though something knowing flickered in her eyes. She handed me the tea. Drink. It'll help with the pain and rebuild your strength. You need to be able to feed that hungry daughter of yours. The tea was bitter but warming, spreading through my chest like liquid sunlight. As I drank, I noticed Ira watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read, not pity, not quite curiosity. Assessment, perhaps. The court is in an uproar, she said quietly, beginning to check my bandages. Word spreads quickly in these halls. The Alpha King who's refused every potential mate for a decade suddenly appears with an Omega and a newborn. You can imagine the speculation. Shame crept up my neck. I didn't ask for this. No one thought you did. Ira's hands stilled. But that won't stop them from having opinions. Some of the nobles are calling it weakness, sentiment clouding the king's judgment. Others. She hesitated. Others see it as an omen. A sign of change. Before I could respond, the door opened. The shift in atmosphere was immediate, electric. Even the fire seemed to burn differently. Cain Ashenblade entered, and the room suddenly felt smaller. In the cabin, I'd seen him as a silhouette, a presence more than a person. Now, in the clear morning light, I could truly see the Alpha King. He stood well over 6 feet, his frame built for war, broad shoulders, muscular arms visible beneath the dark tunic he wore, every movement controlled and purposeful. His black hair was pulled back, revealing the full extent of that brutal scar running down his face. But it was his eyes that held me captive, molten gold that seemed to see straight through flesh and bone to whatever lay beneath. He was terrifying. And despite everything, despite my situation and the impossibility of it all, some traitorous part of me recognized him as magnificent. Leave us, he said to Ira, his voice the same low rumble I remembered. Not a request. A command. Ira curtsied, something I'd never seen a wolf do to anyone except during the most formal ceremonies, and slipped from the room, closing the door with a soft click. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. You should be resting, Cain said finally, moving to stand near the window, carefully maintaining distance. His posture was rigid, formal, nothing like the man who'd knelt in the dirt beside me. I should be dead, I replied, voice sharper than intended. So forgive me if I'm unclear on the protocols. Something flickered across his face, amusement, perhaps, or approval. Your daughter is well. Ira has seen to all her needs. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, too small for what he'd done. For saving us. For bringing us here. You didn't have to. It was my duty. His tone was clipped, almost cold. Anger flared in my chest, hot and sudden. Duty, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Is that what you call it? Pity dressed up in pretty words. His head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. You think I did this out of pity? What else would you call it? I demanded, something reckless rising in me. The powerful Alpha King swooping in to rescue the pathetic Omega? It makes for quite the tale, I'm sure. Very noble. He crossed the room in 3 strides, and suddenly he was there, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him, smell that intoxicating scent of storm and pine. Close enough to be dangerous. But he didn't touch me. Just stood there, towering and furious and somehow still utterly controlled. I call it law, he said, voice low and dangerous. The old lunar code, written when our kind first learned to shift beneath the moon's light. It states that any life saved by an Alpha King becomes his ward, bound under sanctuary until such time as they can stand on their own. His eyes held mine, refusing to let me look away. By crossing your threshold and aiding in your daughter's birth, I invoked that law. You are under my protection now. Both of you. The weight of his words settled over me like a mantle. I don't understand. Why would such a law exist? Because power without mercy makes us monsters, he said quietly. And our ancestors understood that better than we do. Before I could respond, a sharp knock interrupted us. Cain straightened, the intimacy of the moment evaporating as he became the Alpha King once more. Enter, he commanded. A man stepped through the door, tall, lean, with pale blonde hair and ice-blue eyes. He wore the armor of Cain's personal guard, a silver wolf emblazoned on his chest. But there was something in the way he moved, the easy familiarity with which he approached Cain, that spoke of deeper bonds than mere soldier and king. My king, he said, inclining his head respectfully. Then his gaze shifted to me, and I caught curiosity mixed with wariness. I apologize for the interruption, but we have visitors. Cain's expression hardened. Who? Emissaries from Black Moon Pack. 3 of them, led by Beta Marcus. The blond man's lip curled slightly with distaste. They're demanding an audience. Say they've come to retrieve stolen property. My blood turned to ice. They found me. Of course they had. I'd been a fool to think I could ever truly escape. I see. Cain's voice was deceptively calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightening of his jaw. And what grounds do they claim? Pack honor, apparently. And Alpha Garrick's paternal rights. The words dripped with skepticism. I couldn't breathe. Paternal rights. As if Garrick had ever wanted anything to do with the child he'd ordered me to destroy. As if his DNA gave him ownership of a life he'd tried to end. Cain turned to me, and something in his expression made my heart stutter. Do you wish to return to Black Moon Pack, Melva? The question hung in the air between us. I should say yes. Should agree to go back, to face whatever punishment awaited. It would be easier. Safer for him, for his kingdom, for the fragile peace between territories. But when I thought of Lyra, my daughter, my miracle, being raised in that place, taught to see herself as lesser, as property. No, I whispered. Then louder, with more strength, no. I won't go back. I won't let them take her. Cain held my gaze for a long moment, and I saw something shift in those golden eyes. A decision made. A line crossed. He turned to the blond man. Assemble the court. Full formal attendance. I'll meet with these emissaries publicly, so there can be no question of what transpires. My king, the man began, concern evident. Do it, Tor, Cain said softly. It wasn't a command this time, but a request between equals. And send word to post additional guards at the borders. I suspect we'll need them soon. Tor hesitated only a moment before bowing deeply. As you will. He left, closing the door behind him with ominous finality. Cain moved back to the window, his silhouette outlined against the pale sky. The silence stretched between us, pregnant with implications. This will mean conflict, I said quietly. They won't accept your refusal. No, he agreed. They won't. Then why? Because some things are worth fighting for. He didn't turn around. Stay here. Rest. Ira will bring Lyra to you soon. Whatever happens in that throne room, you won't face it. Not today. But I should. You should recover, he said firmly. Let me handle the politics of power. That's what kings do. I wanted to argue, to insist on facing the wolves who'd abandoned me. But exhaustion was creeping back in, and my body was demanding rest I couldn't deny. Cain paused at the door, his hand on the frame. Without looking back, he said, You asked me why I did this. Called it pity. His voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. But pity is what you feel for something weak, something helpless. That's not what I saw in that cabin. He turned his head slightly, just enough that I could see his profile. What I saw was a woman fighting to protect her child even as the world tried to break her. That's not weakness, Melva. That's the kind of strength empires are built on. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the weight of his words and the terrifying realization that everything was about to change. The throne room of the northern fortress was a marvel of ancient architecture, soaring columns carved with the history of Cain's lineage, floors of polished black stone that reflected torchlight like dark water, and a throne of silver whitewood that legend claimed came from a tree blessed by the moon herself. Cain sat upon that throne now, every inch the Alpha King. His dark armor gleamed in the firelight, the crown of twisted silver branches resting on his brow. To his right stood Tor, hand casually resting on his sword hilt. To his left, various nobles and court members arranged themselves according to rank, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. The court was packed. Word had spread faster than wildfire, and everyone wanted to witness this confrontation. The Black Moon emissaries entered with deliberate arrogance. Beta Marcus led them, a stocky gray-haired wolf with cruel eyes and a permanent sneer. Flanking him were two younger warriors, their expressions smug with anticipated victory. Alpha King, Marcus began, his bow perfunctory at best. We come on behalf of Alpha Garrick of Black Moon Pack. We seek the return of property stolen from our territory 3 nights past. Murmurs rippled through the assembled court. Cain's expression remained impassive. Property. An interesting word. Be more specific. Marcus's sneer widened. The Omega Melva, and the child she bore. Both belong to Black Moon by right of origin and blood. We demand their immediate return. Demand. Cain's voice was soft, dangerous. You stand in my hall and make demands? We invoke pack honor. Pack honor. Cain interrupted, rising from his throne. The movement was fluid, predatory. Tell me, Beta Marcus, where was this honor when your Alpha abandoned a laboring Omega to die in the wilderness? Where was honor when you left a mother and child to the mercy of wolves and weather? Marcus's face flushed. The Omega broke pack law. She refused direct orders from her Alpha. Such defiance cannot. Cannot what? Cain descended the steps, each footfall echoing through the chamber. Cannot be tolerated? Cannot be forgiven? Or cannot be allowed to live? He stopped directly in front of the emissary, towering over him. Your Alpha ordered her to terminate a healthy pregnancy. When she refused, he exiled her to die. That is not law. That is murder dressed in authority. The child carries Alpha blood. Then he should have protected her. The words cracked through the air like thunder. Any true Alpha protects those who carry his lineage. Your Alpha Garrick is either a coward or a fool, and I will not return an innocent woman and child to either. Marcus's hand moved toward his weapon, and instantly Tor's sword was drawn, the sound of steel singing through the hall. The Black Moon warriors tensed, hands on hilts. I wouldn't, Tor said pleasantly, though his eyes promised death. You refuse our claim? Marcus snarled. I invoke the old lunar code, Cain said, his voice carrying to every corner of the throne room. By crossing her threshold and aiding in the birth of her child, I have claimed Melva and her daughter as wards of the Northern Crown. They are under my protection. They are mine by law. Shocked whispers erupted throughout the hall. You cannot. I can. And I have. Cain's eyes blazed gold. Return to your Alpha with this message. Melva and Lyra are under the protection of the Northern Territories. Any attempt to reclaim them will be considered an act of aggression against the Crown. And if Black Moon Pack crosses my borders seeking what they abandoned. His voice dropped, deadly quiet. I will consider it an act of war. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus's face had gone purple with rage. Alpha Garrick will not accept this insult. Then let him bring his grievances himself, Cain said coldly. But he will do so as a petitioner, not a conqueror. And he will do so knowing that every action he takes against those under my protection will be met with overwhelming force. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. Do I make myself clear, Beta Marcus? For a long moment, the two men stared at each other, a battle of wills played out in silence. Then Marcus jerked his head in what might have been a nod. We will relay your position to Alpha Garrick. See that you do. And inform him that my borders are now closed to Black Moon wolves until further notice. Cain gestured dismissively. Tor will escort you to the territory line. I suggest you reach it before nightfall. The emissaries left, their retreat less triumphant than their arrival. The moment they were gone, the throne room erupted in conversation, some approving, others scandalized, all shocked. Cain let them talk, his expression unreadable. Then he raised one hand, and silence fell immediately. "Let the word go out across all territories," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The Omega Melva and her daughter Lyra are under the personal protection of the Northern Crown. Any who seek to harm them answer to me." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This audience is concluded." The court began to disperse, nobles clustering in groups to dissect what had just occurred. Cain remained on the dais, watching them go with hooded eyes. Tor approached once the room had mostly cleared. "That went about as well as expected." "Which is to say, poorly," Cain agreed. "Garrick won't accept this. You know that." "Yes." "This could mean war. Over an Omega and a child who aren't even," Tor caught himself, but the implication hung between them. Cain turned to face his oldest friend, his beta, the brother of his choosing if not his blood. "Say it." Tor met his gaze steadily. "Who aren't even yours." "No," Cain agreed quietly. "They're not mine. But perhaps that's exactly why this matters." He moved to the window that overlooked the training grounds, watching his wolves spar in the fading light. "How many others like her are out there, Tor? How many Omegas cast aside because they dared to choose life over obedience? How many children abandoned because they were inconvenient?" "Too many," Tor admitted. "The packs speak of honor and tradition, but where is the honor in cruelty? Where is the tradition in abandoning the vulnerable?" Cain's hands clenched into fists. "We call ourselves civilized, yet we commit atrocities in the name of law. And you think protecting one Omega will change that?" "I think." Cain paused, choosing his words carefully. "I think mercy is a strength we've forgotten, and perhaps it's the only strength that truly matters." He turned back to Tor, and his expression held a vulnerability rarely seen. "When I found her in that cabin, bleeding and alone, fighting to bring life into a world that had condemned her, I saw my mother." Tor's expression softened. He knew the story, everyone in the inner circle did. Cain's mother, cast out for bearing a half-blood child. Cain himself, raised by an alpha who'd taken pity on an orphaned boy. "You're not your mother's fate," Tor said gently. "You survived. You conquered. You rule." "Because someone showed mercy when they didn't have to," Cain replied. "Because one alpha chose compassion over tradition. Perhaps it's time I paid that debt forward. Even if it costs you your kingdom?" Cain's smile was bitter. What kind of kingdom is worth preserving if it's built on the graves of innocents? He clapped Tor on the shoulder. "Double the border patrols. Send scouts to watch Blackman's movements. And have Ira keep me informed of Melva's recovery." "You're really doing this," Tor said. "Not a question." "I am." "Then I suppose I'd better sharpen my sword." Tor's grin was fierce. "If we're going to war over principles, at least they're good ones." After Tor left, Cain remained at the window, watching darkness fall over his territory. Somewhere in this fortress, Melva was recovering, probably terrified of what her presence here meant. She'd asked him why, called it pity. But the truth was far more complicated. Pity was easy, requiring nothing but momentary sympathy. What he felt when he looked at her, bleeding defiant, refusing to surrender even as death approached, that wasn't pity. It was recognition. "Perhaps mercy is the only strength left to me," he murmured to the empty room, to the moon rising over distant mountains. The words tasted like truth, and like the beginning of something that would either save his kingdom or burn it to ash. Time moved differently within the northern fortress. The first week passed in a haze of pain and recovery, my body slowly knitting itself back together under Ira's watchful care. The second week brought strength returning to my limbs, though I still tired easily. By the third, I could walk the corridors without assistance, could hold Lyra for hours without my arms trembling. My daughter thrived. In those weeks, she transformed from the fragile, blood-slicked creature born in desperation into something miraculous. Her eyes, initially the cloudy blue of all newborns, were beginning to shift toward a striking amber, flecked with gold. When she slept, which was often, her tiny face held an expression of perfect peace that made my chest ache with love so fierce it frightened me. She's beautiful, Ira said one morning, watching me nurse Lyra by the window. Sunlight streamed through the glass, catching in my daughter's dark hair and turning it almost bronze. Strong too. Look at how she grips your finger. I smiled, marveling at the fierce determination in that tiny grasp. She's a fighter. Like her mother. Ira began changing the bandages on my abdomen, her movements practiced and gentle. The wounds were healing cleanly, she'd assured me, though the scars would remain. You've recovered remarkably well, all things considered. Most Omegas wouldn't have survived what you endured. Most Omegas wouldn't have been stupid enough to flee into a blizzard 9 months pregnant, I said wryly. Most Omegas wouldn't have had the courage. Ira's tone was firm, brooking no argument. She finished with the bandages and sat back, studying me with those moss-green eyes. You're settling in well. The fortress suits you. I glanced around the luxurious chamber that had become my temporary home. It's overwhelming. Beautiful, but overwhelming. Wait until you see more of it. The king has granted you freedom of the fortress and grounds. You're not a prisoner here, Melva. You're a guest. A protected ward. The words should have brought comfort, but instead, they tightened something in my chest. For how long? Ira paused in gathering her supplies. What do you mean? How long before I'm expected to leave? To stand on my own, as the law states. I looked down at Lyra, who'd fallen asleep at my breast, milk-drunk and content. I have nothing. No pack, no family, no means to support myself or my daughter. Once I'm healed, what then? Then you figure it out, Ira said simply. With help, if you're wise enough to accept it. The Northern Pack isn't like Black Moon, Melva. We value our Omegas. We don't discard them like broken tools. Before I could respond, a soft knock interrupted us. At Ira's call to enter, a young woman appeared, one of the fortress staff, judging by her simple dress and the bundle she carried. Pardon the intrusion, she said, curtsying to me in a way that made me deeply uncomfortable. The king's steward sent these. He thought you might need proper clothing, and garments for the little one. She set the bundle on the bed, and when I opened it, my breath caught. Inside were dresses of soft wool and fine linen, all in muted colors that wouldn't show the inevitable stains of motherhood. Beneath them, tiny clothes for Lyra, delicately embroidered gowns and soft blankets in silver and white. This is too much, I whispered. The king was quite specific about your comfort, the young woman said, a knowing smile playing at her lips. He wants you to feel welcome here. After she left, Ira helped me into one of the new dresses, a deep forest green that brought out the amber in my eyes. It fit perfectly, as if tailored specifically for my post-pregnancy body. I caught my reflection in the polished silver mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked, cared for, almost regal. The seamstresses worked through the night, Ira mentioned casually. The king's orders. Why would he? Because he's a good man, Ira interrupted gently. Despite what his reputation might suggest. Now, I have other patients to attend to. Why don't you explore a bit? The gardens are lovely this time of day, even with the snow. I ventured out with Lyra bundled against my chest, wrapped in one of the new blankets. The fortress was a labyrinth of stone corridors and sweeping staircases, each turn revealing new wonders. Tapestries depicting ancient battles and legendary wolves. Weapons mounted on walls, some clearly ceremonial, others worn with use. Windows that framed the mountains like living paintings. And wolves. Everywhere, wolves. They nodded respectfully as I passed, some even smiling. A few of the women stopped to coo over Lyra, their admiration seeming genuine rather than obligatory. It was so different from Black Moon, where Omegas were expected to keep their eyes down, to make themselves invisible. You're the one the king saved. I turned to find an elderly woman watching me, her silver hair elaborately braided, her dress speaking of noble status. Her expression was curious, but not unkind. Yes, I managed. She stepped closer, peering at Lyra with sharp blue eyes. Pretty child. Strong wolf blood in her, I'd wager. What's her name? Lyra. Lyra, the woman repeated, seeming to taste the word. After the constellation. Fitting for one born under such dramatic stars. She met my gaze directly. I'm Lady Astrid, one of the king's advisors. I wanted to see for myself what all the fuss was about. My spine straightened instinctively. I didn't ask for any of this. No, I don't suppose you did. Astrid's expression softened fractionally. But you have it nonetheless. The question is what you'll do with it. I don't understand. The king has made you a symbol, whether you intended it or not. His protection of you sends a message, about mercy, about justice, about the kind of kingdom he means to build. She paused. Not everyone approves of that message. Cold dread settled in my stomach. What do you mean? But Astrid was already walking away, her parting words drifting back. Watch yourself, girl. And watch who you trust. I found myself in the gardens that afternoon, desperate for fresh air and solitude to process Astrid's warning. The space was breathtaking, even in winter. Carefully tended evergreens and winter roses created pockets of color against the snow. Stone benches were scattered throughout, some positioned to catch the sun, others tucked into shadowed alcoves. I settled on one of the sunny benches, adjusting Lyra's blanket and simply breathing. For a moment, I could almost pretend this was my life, that I belonged in this beautiful place, that my daughter would grow up safe and loved. She has your nose. I jumped, nearly dislodging Lyra, and turned to find Cain emerging from one of the garden paths. He wasn't wearing his formal armor today, just dark leather and wool, his hair loose around his shoulders. He looked younger somehow, less like the fearsome Alpha King and more like, just a man. Your Majesty, I said, starting to stand. Don't. He raised a hand, stopping me. Please. I didn't mean to startle you. He hesitated, and I realized with shock that he seemed uncertain. May I? It took me a moment to understand he was asking permission to sit beside me. The Alpha King, requesting my consent. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He settled onto the bench, maintaining a respectful distance, and for a long moment, we simply sat in silence. His presence was overwhelming, that scent of storm and pine, the barely contained power in his frame, but not threatening. Not anymore. How are you feeling? He asked finally. Better. Stronger. I glanced at him. Thanks to your healer. Your hospitality. Your everything. You say that like it's a burden. Isn't it? The words came out sharper than intended. I've brought nothing but trouble to your kingdom. The court whispers about me. Black Moon is threatening war. All because you showed mercy to a stranger. You're not a stranger, he said quietly. Not anymore. Something in his tone made my heart skip. I focused on Lyra instead, on the safe weight of her in my arms. Lady Astrid said I've become a symbol. That your protection of me sends a message that not everyone approves of. Cain's jaw tightened. Astrid speaks true, as always. There are those in my court who believe strength and mercy cannot coexist. That compassion is weakness. Maybe they're right. They're not. His voice held absolute certainty. I've seen what strength without mercy creates. I've watched kingdoms built on cruelty crumble under their own weight. Power that demands suffering is hollow. It's fear masquerading as respect. I turned to face him fully. You sound like you're speaking from experience. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my mother was an Omega. The words fell between us like stones into still water, sending ripples through everything I thought I knew about him. She was young when she caught the eye of a visiting Alpha, charismatic, powerful, everything an Omega was taught to desire. He stayed for a season, promised her the world, and left her with child. Cain's gaze was distant, lost in memory. Me. I held my breath, afraid to interrupt. When her pack discovered she carried a half-blood, a child with no legitimate claim, no pack standing, they cast her out. Left her to wander, pregnant and alone, until she collapsed at the borders of the Northern Territory. His hands clenched into fists. The Alpha King at the time, Aldrich Stoneheart, found her. He could have turned her away. Should have, by every law and custom. But he didn't. What did he do? He brought her into his home, gave her sanctuary, promised that any child born under his protection would be considered pack. Cain's voice roughened. She died 3 days after I was born. Complications from the birth. I never knew her beyond the stories Aldrich told me. My throat tightened with unshed tears. I'm sorry. Aldrich raised me as his own. Not as his heir, he had legitimate children for that, but as Pack. He gave me a name, an education, training. Everything I needed to survive in a world that saw my birth as shameful. Cain turned to me then, and the intensity in his golden eyes stole my breath. But more than that, he taught me something crucial. What? That strength means nothing if it demands cruelty. That true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice to protect. He gestured to Lyra, sleeping peacefully between us. When I found you in that cabin, I didn't see weakness. I saw my mother, alone, desperate, fighting for her child against a world that had condemned her. And I thought, not again. Not if I can prevent it. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's why you invoked the old lunar code. That's why I couldn't walk away. His gaze dropped to Lyra. My mother didn't survive. But perhaps your daughter will. Perhaps that means something. Without thinking, I shifted Lyra slightly toward him. Would you like to hold her? Surprise flickered across his face, followed by something that might have been longing. I don't want to wake her. She's tougher than she looks. Carefully, almost reverently, Cain took Lyra into his arms. The contrast was striking, this massive warrior cradling a tiny infant with such gentleness it made my chest ache. Lyra stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and for a moment, amber met gold. Something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Or promise. Hello, little one, Cain murmured, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Welcome to the pack. Watching them together, the scarred king and my daughter, I felt something shift inside me. Not attraction, though that was certainly present. Something deeper. Trust, maybe. Or the first fragile shoots of belonging. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. For seeing us. For caring when no one else would. Cain looked up, and the expression on his face was unguarded, vulnerable. Don't thank me yet. The path ahead won't be easy. I know. Lady Astrid warned me. Said not everyone approves. Astrid is wise to be cautious. He handed Lyra back to me, though I saw reluctance in the gesture. There are factions in the court who see your presence as manipulation. They believe you've enchanted me somehow, that you're using Omega wiles to influence the throne. Anger flared hot in my chest. That's ridiculous. I haven't. I know. His hand moved as if to touch mine, then stopped, hovering in the space between us. But perception matters in politics. We'll need to be careful. We. The word came out smaller than I intended. His hand completed its journey, settling gently over mine. The contact sent electricity racing up my arm. You're under my protection, Melva. That makes your enemies mine. Your battles mine. His thumb traced small circles on my skin, the gesture absent and intimate. I won't let them hurt you. Or Lyra. I swear it. I should have pulled away. Should have maintained the distance appropriate between an Alpha King and an Omega Ward. But his hand was warm, and I'd been cold for so long. Your Majesty. Cain, he interrupted softly. When we're alone, just Cain. Cain, I tested the name, felt it settle on my tongue like honey. What happens if they refuse to accept us? If the court demands you cast us out? His eyes hardened, that gentle king vanishing beneath the warrior. Then they'll learn what it means to truly test their Alpha King. The following weeks passed in a strange sort of domesticity. I fell into a rhythm, mornings with Lyra, afternoons exploring the fortress or the gardens, evenings learning northern customs from Ira. Cain appeared often, always with some excuse. Checking on my recovery. Bringing gifts for Lyra. Requesting my opinion on matters of the nursery's location or the quality of my quarters. We talked. Tentatively at first, then with growing ease. He told me about his childhood, about Aldrich's lessons in leadership and justice. I told him about my life in Black Moon, the slow erosion of hope, the desperate choice to flee. We never discussed what might be growing between us, that remained carefully unspoken, hovering in charged glances and accidental touches. But the court noticed. I caught the whispers as I walked the corridors. Saw the way some nobles sneered when I passed. One afternoon, walking near the council chambers with Lyra, I heard voices carrying through a partially open door. Unnatural influence over the king. She's bewitched him, clearly. No other explanation for this madness. The child is an abomination. Half-blood, born of shame. She doesn't belong in these halls. The word hit me like a blade. Abomination. I'd heard it before, whispered about half-bloods, about children born outside proper bonds. But hearing it applied to my daughter, my innocent Lyra, I fled before they could see my tears. That night, I held Lyra close and wept into her soft hair. What was I doing? Lady Astrid was right. I'd become a symbol, a lightning rod for discontent. My presence here endangered not just myself, but Cain's rule. His kingdom. Maybe I should leave. Find some distant territory where no one knew my face or my story. Start over somewhere that wouldn't demand Cain choose between his throne and his principles. The knock on my door came near midnight. I just settled Lyra in her cradle and was preparing for bed when I heard it, soft, almost hesitant. Cain stood in the corridor, still dressed despite the late hour. In his hands, he held a small wooden box. I saw you earlier, he said quietly. Near the council chambers. You looked upset. Of course he'd noticed. He noticed everything. I overheard some of your nobles, I admitted. Their opinions of me. Of Lyra. His expression darkened. What did they say? Nothing that isn't true. I'm a complication. An omega with no pack, no standing. My daughter is, my voice broke. They called her an abomination. They're fools. The words came out hard, angry. And they'll answer to me for their cruelty. Please don't. I caught his arm, stopping him. That will only make it worse. They already think I manipulate you. If you punish them on my behalf. I don't care what they think. But I do. The words burst out of me. Don't you see? Every time you defend me, every kindness you show, it proves their point. They see weakness. Sentiment clouding the king's judgment. Then let them see it, he said fiercely. Let them see that their king values mercy over their narrow-minded traditions. He held up the box. May I come in? I stepped back, allowing him to enter. He moved to Lyra's cradle, looking down at my sleeping daughter with an expression of such tenderness it made my heart ache. I brought this for her, he said, opening the box. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, lay a pendant, 2 crescent moons intertwined, crafted from gleaming silver. It's the symbol of the Northern Crown. When a wolf is formally accepted into the pack, they receive one. Usually during the naming ceremony at 6 months, but... He lifted the pendant, letting it catch the firelight. I wanted Lyra to have hers now. Cain, you can't. The court. The court will accept what I decree. He turned to face me. This isn't about them, Melva. This is about her. About making sure everyone knows that Lyra is under my protection. That she belongs to this pack, this kingdom. That anyone who calls her an abomination answers to me. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Why are you doing this? Why risk so much for us? He moved closer, cupping my face gently. Because some things are worth the risk. Because I spent my whole life being told I didn't belong, and I won't let your daughter suffer the same. His thumb brushed away my tears. Because when I look at you, I see strength. And when I look at her, I see hope. And maybe that's exactly what this kingdom needs. The distance between us vanished. I didn't know who moved first. Maybe we both did. His lips found mine in a kiss that was gentle and desperate all at once, tasting of promises and possibilities. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Tomorrow, he said quietly, I'm holding a formal ceremony. The entire court will attend. And I'm going to present Lyra with this pendant, claiming her officially as a member of the Northern Pack. His eyes met mine. They can whisper all they want. But they'll do it knowing exactly where their king stands. This will cause problems, I whispered. Let it. His smile was fierce. I faced worse than court politics. After he left, I held the pendant up to the moonlight streaming through my window. The twin moons spun slowly, catching silver fire. Tomorrow, Cain would make a statement. Would draw a line in the snow and dare anyone to cross it. And I realized, holding my daughter's new symbol of belonging, that I was no longer just grateful for his protection. I was falling for him. The thought terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure. Because however this ended, whether in triumph or tragedy, there would be no going back. We had crossed a threshold tonight, Cain and I. Now we would face whatever came next together. The ceremony was supposed to change everything. Cain had made his declaration 3 days ago, presenting Lyra with the twin moon pendant before the entire assembled court. I'd stood beside him on the dais, my daughter in my arms, trying not to tremble as hundreds of eyes watched us. Some gazes held approval. Others, barely concealed contempt. By my authority as Alpha King of the Northern Territories, Cain had proclaimed, his voice carrying to every corner of the throne room, I formally accept Lyra, daughter of Melva, into the Northern Pack. She is pack-born now, entitled to all protections and privileges thereof. The silence that followed had been deafening. Then slowly, some wolves had begun to howl, the traditional acceptance. But not all. Not even half. The division in the court was stark, undeniable. In the days since, that division had only deepened. Now, hiding in the shadows of a corridor near the council chambers, I listened to voices raised in argument and felt ice crystallize in my veins. Cannot continue this madness. That was Lord Silas, one of Cain's senior advisors, his voice sharp with frustration. Garrick's forces raided 3 border settlements this week alone. 8 dead, dozens wounded. How many more must die for the king's sentiment? The king has made his position clear, another voice responded, Lady Astrid, her tone measured but strained. The Omega and child are under his protection. Protection. Silas spat the word. He's brought war to our doorstep over a refugee and a bastard child. The raids will continue until we give Black Moon what they want. What they want is murder, Astrid countered. Garrick would kill the Omega the moment he had her back. And the child is not our concern. Silas's fist hit the table with a crack that made me flinch. Our concern is the pack. Our people. Not some Omega who wandered into our territory and bewitched our king. Choose your next words carefully, Silas. Tor's voice cut in, cold and dangerous. You're bordering on treason. Treason. Silas laughed bitterly. Treason would be standing silent while our king destroys everything our ancestors built for a woman he barely knows. The council has a duty to advise, and I'm advising that we end this before it escalates further. And how do you propose we do that? Astrid asked quietly. The pause that followed made my heart hammer against my ribs. We bargain, Silas said finally. Return the Omega to Black Moon with suitable compensation, gold, territory, whatever Garrick demands. Frame it as justice, not surrender. The king will be angry, but he'll see reason eventually. He must. He'll never agree, Tor said flatly. Then we don't give him a choice. Another voice now, Lord Henrik, younger but ambitious. The council can act without the king's consent in matters of territorial security. It's in the charter. You're suggesting we override our Alpha King? Astrid's voice held genuine shock. I'm suggesting we save him from himself, Silas replied. Before his obsession costs us everything. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned and fled, silent as a ghost, Lyra's pendant burning against my chest where I wore it for safekeeping. They were going to trade me back to Garrick. To save the kingdom, they would sacrifice me and my daughter to the very monster we'd fled. And Cain. Cain would lose everything trying to stop them. The moon was high when I returned to my chambers, my mind racing through impossible choices. I could tell Cain what I'd overheard, force him into direct confrontation with his own council. But that would only deepen the rift, maybe even trigger the civil unrest Silas was clearly prepared to risk. Or I could do what I should have done weeks ago. Leave. The thought settled over me like fresh snow, cold, inevitable. If I disappeared, took Lyra and vanished into the wilderness, the crisis would resolve itself. Garrick couldn't demand my return if I couldn't be found. The council couldn't trade what they didn't have. And Cain. Cain could rule his kingdom without the weight of me destroying it. I moved mechanically, gathering supplies. A fur-lined cloak. Dried meat and bread from the kitchen stores I'd been quietly hoarding. Clean cloth for bandages. A water skin. The silver pendant I tucked inside my dress, against my heart. Lyra was 6 weeks old now, still too young for such a journey, but what choice did I have? Stay and watch Kane's kingdom tear itself apart? Let the council hand us both to Garrick? At least in the wilderness, we'd have a chance. I waited until the fortress settled into the deep quiet of pre-dawn, when even the guards grew drowsy at their posts. Then, with Lyra bundled against my chest in layers of wool and fur, I slipped through the servants' passages Ira had shown me weeks ago. The snow was falling again, thick and silent, erasing footprints almost as quickly as I made them. Perfect cover, if it didn't kill me first. The forest loomed ahead, dark and endless, and I pushed down the memory of the last time I'd fled into the winter night. This time would be different. This time, I knew what I was running from. And what I was running toward: survival, freedom, a chance for Lyra to grow up away from politics and war. Even if it meant never seeing Kane again. The thought sent a spike of pain through my chest, so sharp it nearly stopped me. When had he become so vital? When had the idea of his absence become unbearable? Don't think about it. Just run. I made it perhaps a mile into the forest before I heard the howls. They came from behind, multiple voices raised in hunting song. My blood froze. They'd discovered my absence. Of course they had. Kane probably had guards posted outside my chambers, watching even when I didn't notice. I ran faster, stumbling through snow that grabbed at my ankles, branches whipping at my face. Lyra began to cry, sensing my fear, and I clutched her tighter, murmuring desperate reassurances. The howls grew closer. They were faster than me, stronger, not weakened by childbirth and weeks of recovery. They would catch me. It was only a matter of time. But I had to try. A root caught my foot and I went down hard, twisting my body at the last second to protect Lyra from the impact. Pain exploded through my shoulder as it connected with frozen ground. The world spun, snow filling my mouth and eyes. When I looked up, he was there. Kane emerged from the trees like vengeance incarnate, his eyes blazing gold in the darkness. He'd shifted partially. I could see it in the elongation of his features, the claws tipping his fingers. Behind him, Tor and several guards fanned out, forming a perimeter. Everyone else, back to the fortress, Kane commanded, his voice rough with the partial shift. Now. They hesitated only a moment before obeying, melting back into the trees. Then it was just us, the Alpha King and the fleeing Omega, snow falling between us like ash. Get up, he said, and I couldn't read his expression. I struggled to my feet, every muscle screaming protest, Lyra wailing against my chest. Please, I whispered. Please, just let me go. I'll disappear. Garrick will never find me. Your council can tell him I escaped and... You overheard them. Not a question. They want to trade me back, I said, hating how my voice broke. They're planning to override you, to give Garrick what he wants to stop the raids. And they're right, Kane. People are dying because of me. Your kingdom is tearing itself apart because you showed mercy to a stranger. You're not a stranger. The words cracked through the air like thunder. He closed the distance between us in 3 strides, his presence overwhelming. You stopped being a stranger the moment I pulled you from that cabin. The moment I held your daughter and swore to protect her. The moment he stopped, breathing hard. The moment you what? I demanded, tears freezing on my cheeks. The moment you destroyed your own peace for someone who isn't worth it? I've seen the reports, Kane. I know what Garrick's doing. The raids, the deaths, that's my fault. My burden to bear, not yours. You think I'd trade you to save my crown? His voice dropped to something dangerous. You think I'd hand you and Lyra to that monster to purchase peace? I think you're a king, I said desperately. And kings have to make impossible choices. Your people are suffering. Your council is plotting against you. Your kingdom is on the brink of civil war. All because you won't let go of, my voice failed. Of what? Say it. Of us. The sob tore out of me. Of me. Of this, whatever this is between us. You have to let us go, Kane. Before it destroys everything you've built. No. The word was absolute, immovable. They'll destroy you because of me. Then let them try. He grabbed my shoulders, gentle despite his fury, forcing me to meet his blazing gaze. Do you understand what you've done? You've run from everyone who should have protected you. Fled into the wilderness twice now rather than accept help. And you think, his laugh was bitter, broken. You think I'll just let you disappear? That I could go back to that fortress knowing you're out here alone, knowing I let you go. It's the smart choice, I whispered. The logical one. I choose this war. His forehead pressed against mine, his breath warm on my frozen skin. I choose you. I choose Lyra. And I will burn my own kingdom to ash before I let anyone take you from me. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more. His hand slid from my shoulders to cup my face, thumbs brushing away frozen tears. The council thinks they can override me? Let them try. Garrick thinks he can raid my borders until I surrender? Let him send his armies. I will fight them all, Melva. Every last one. Because what I feel when I look at you, his voice roughened. That's not duty. That's not mercy. That's something I never thought I'd have. What? The word barely made it past my lips. Love, he said simply. I love you. I love your daughter. And I will not lose you because frightened men demand I choose between my heart and my crown. His eyes held mine, fierce and tender. I choose both. Let the kingdom burn if it can't accept that. The world tilted. He loved me. This powerful, terrifying, gentle king loved me. I love you too, I whispered, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. That's why I had to leave. I can't watch you destroy yourself for us. His mouth crashed against mine, swallowing the words. The kiss was desperate, claiming, full of all the fear and fury and love we'd been too careful to name. Lyra was pressed between us, her cries fading into whimpers as Cain's warmth surrounded us both. When we broke apart, both shaking, he pressed his forehead to mine again. Never again, he breathed. Promise me. No more running. No more trying to save me from myself. We face this together or not at all. Cain. Promise me, Melva. I looked into those golden eyes and saw my future. Complicated, dangerous, probably impossible. But mine. Ours. I promise, I whispered. Good. He pulled back slightly, and I saw the shift in him, from desperate man to decisive king. Then we end this. Tonight. He took Lyra from my arms, cradling her with that same gentle strength that never failed to make my chest ache. Then he stripped off his heavy cloak and wrapped it around me, the fur still warm from his body. Can you walk? I nodded, though my legs trembled. Then walk with me. He offered his free hand. And witness what happens when someone threatens what's mine. We emerged from the forest to find the fortress courtyard packed with wolves. Word had spread, of my flight, of the king's pursuit, of whatever was about to unfold. Torches blazed against the pre-dawn darkness, casting everything in flickering gold. The council stood on the steps, Silas, Henrik, Astrid, and others. Some looked defiant. Others, afraid. Cain strode forward, still holding Lyra, his presence commanding instant silence. I walked beside him, wrapped in his cloak, and felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. I understand, Cain said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, that there has been discussion regarding the fate of my ward and her daughter. Silas stepped forward. Your Majesty, we were merely... Silence. The word cracked like a whip. Silas froze. You were plotting to override your Alpha King. To trade lives under my protection to satisfy an enemy's demands. To value peace over principle. Cain's eyes blazed. You disappoint me, old friend. The raids, Henrik began. The raids are Garrick's choice, Cain interrupted. His act of war. Not mine. Not Melva's. If he wants blood, he can face me himself instead of attacking defenseless settlements like a coward.
He turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. I have tried to rule with mercy balanced by strength, to honor the old laws while building something new. And some of you have mistaken that mercy for weakness, mistaken compassion for failure. He held Lyra higher, and even she seemed to sense the moment's gravity, her cries fading to silence. This child was born in blood and suffering. Her mother fled death itself to give her life. When I found them, I had a choice: walk away and let nature take its course, or honor the laws our ancestors wrote when they still remembered what it meant to be more than beasts. His gaze swept the crowd. I chose honor. I chose mercy. And I would make that choice again, knowing everything it would cost. But it costs us all. Silas protested. The kingdom suffers for your sentiment. The kingdom suffers because Garrick Thorne is a tyrant who sees life as property. Cain's voice thundered, because he would rather wage war than accept that an Omega had the courage to defy him. The fault lies with him, not with a mother protecting her child. He moved to stand directly before the council. You want to trade Melva back to secure peace? Then you fundamentally misunderstand what we're fighting for. This isn't about one Omega. It's about what kind of wolves we are. What kind of kingdom we build. Then what do you propose? Astrid asked quietly. Cain looked at me then, and something in his expression made my heart stop. I invoke the right of personal claim, he said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My own breath caught. The right of personal claim was ancient law, rarely used. It allowed an alpha king to formally claim an individual as personally bound to the crown. Not as a ward, not as a subject, as something more intimate. It was protection absolute, declaring the claimed individual as essential to the king himself. It was also deeply controversial. Claiming an Omega this way implied, "You can't," Silas breathed, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Your Majesty, the political implications." "I can, and I do." Cain's voice rang out clear and absolute. "Before all of you as witnesses, I claim Melva and her daughter Lyra as mine, by blood right and royal authority. They are no longer merely under my protection. They are bound to me, to the Northern Crown, inseparable from my rule." His eyes found mine. "Any who threaten them threatens me directly. Any who seek their harm declares war on the Northern Throne." The courtyard erupted in voices, shock, outrage, approval, all tangled together. But I heard none of it. I could only stare at Cain, at this impossible man who was rewriting the laws of kingdoms for me. "Do you accept?" he asked, and though he addressed the question to me, it carried to everyone present. "Do you accept my claim, Melva?" My voice wouldn't work. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Say it," he said gently. "They need to hear." "I accept," I whispered. Then louder. "I accept your claim, Cain Ashenblade. I accept your protection. You're everything." Something fierce and triumphant flashed in his eyes. He turned back to the assembly, Lyra still cradled in one arm, the other reaching for me. "It is done," he declared. "Let the word spread to every territory. Melva and Lyra are mine, under the protection of the Northern Crown. Let Garrick come if he dares. Let anyone who questions this come face me themselves." He should have looked alone in that moment, one man against the doubts of many. But as I took his hand, as Tor stepped forward to stand beside us, as even Lady Astrid moved to our side, I realized he wasn't alone. None of us were. Then, cutting through the tumultuous voices, came a different sound. A howl, not celebratory, but warning. Alarm. The guards on the walls were howling, their voices urgent with threat. Tor's head snapped up. "What?" "Fire!" someone screamed. "Fire on the eastern border!" More howls rose, a cacophony of alarm spreading through the fortress, like wildfire itself. Cain thrust Lyra into my arms, his expression transforming from tender to deadly in a heartbeat. "Tor with me. Astrid, get them inside." "No," I said, surprising myself. "If this is because of me, I face it with you." "Melva, you just claimed me as yours," I said fiercely. "That means I stand with you. Not behind you. With you." For a moment, he looked like he might argue. Then he nodded once, sharp and approving. "Everyone defensive positions," he roared. "Silas, mobilize the reserves. Henrik, secure the civilians." Now, the courtyard exploded into organized chaos. And through it all, I stood with Lyra in my arms, wrapped in the Alpha King's cloak, and watched our fragile peace shatter. Whatever came next, war, betrayal, blood, we would face it together. Cain had made his choice, had claimed me before his entire kingdom. Now we would both live with the consequences. The howls continued, rising into the dawn like prayers to a merciless moon. And somewhere in the distance, I swore I could hear other wolves answering. Garrick was coming. The Great Hall of Stones had stood for over 1,000 years, built by the first wolves who learned to balance human cunning with animal strength. Its walls were carved from a single mountain, hollowed out by generations of laborers until it became something between cathedral and cavern. Ancient sigils covered every surface, the history of our kind written in stone and blood. I'd never imagined I would stand within it. The last time the Council of 12 convened was 347 years ago. Ira told me, as she helped me dress. During the Great Plague, when entire packs were being wiped out and the survivors needed unified leadership to endure. My hands trembled as she fastened the dress Cain had sent, deep midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread in patterns of moons and stars. It was beautiful. It was armor. What happened? I asked. They created the quarantine protocols, saved thousands of lives, but the process nearly destroyed them. Every alpha fighting for their own pack's interests, unable to see the larger threat. Ira's hand stilled on my shoulders. Cain is gambling that this time will be different. Because of me. The weight of it pressed down like physical force. Because of what you represent, Ira corrected gently. She turned me to face her, her moss-green eyes intense. You're not just a refugee anymore, Melva. You're a symbol of everything wrong with how we've treated Omegas. And symbols have power. Lyra began to fuss in her cradle, and I moved to lift her, breathing in her sweet infant scent. 2 months old now, growing stronger every day. Her eyes had fully shifted to that striking amber gold, and sometimes when she looked at me, I swore I saw understanding beyond her age. She can't come with me, I said, though the thought of being separated from her made my chest ache. I'll watch her, Ira promised. She'll be safe. I swear it. A knock at the door announced Cain's arrival. He entered already dressed for the council, formal armor of blackened steel and silver, his crown of twisted branches resting on his dark hair. The scar running down his face seemed more pronounced somehow, a reminder of battles fought and survived. But when he looked at me, his expression softened. You look like a queen, he said quietly. I'm not. You look like my queen, he corrected, crossing to stand before me. His hand settled on my waist, careful and reverent. No, I admitted, but I'll do it anyway. His smile was fierce and proud. That's my girl. He pressed a kiss to my forehead, then to Lyra's. The alphas are gathering. Some have already arrived. Garrick came at dawn, with an honor guard of 20. Fear spiked through me. He's here, under flag of truce, Cain assured me. He can't touch you. Not here. Not with the council laws in effect. Anyone who violates sanctuary during council proceedings forfeits their pack and their life. Will that stop him? It will stop him from acting directly. Cain's jaw tightened, but expect him to use every word as a weapon. The alphas arrived throughout the morning, and I watched from a high window as each delegation entered the fortress. They came with banners flying, honor guards in formation, centuries of pride and power on display. Alpha Mira of the River Pack, elegant and silver-haired, her wolves dressed in blues and greens. Alpha Theron of the Mountain Guard, massive and scarred, his people moving like living stone. Alpha Kasha of the Wildwood, young for an alpha, with eyes like a hawk and warriors who move through the fortress like shadows. 11 alphas in total, representing the major packs across the territories. And Garrick making 12. I saw him from my window. Tall and handsome in that cold, cruel way some men manage. Blonde hair perfectly styled, armor polished to mirror brightness. He moved with absolute confidence, surrounded by wolves who looked at him like he was their god. This was the man who demanded I kill my own child, who'd exiled me to die when I refused, who'd ordered raids on Cain's borders to force my return, and now I would have to face him. The great hall filled as the sun reached its zenith. The 12 sat in a circle, literally a circle, with no head or hierarchy. Each alpha equal in this space. Behind each alpha stood their second and advisors, creating rings of power and politics. Cain sat in the north position, Tor at his right shoulder. I stood behind and to the left, visible but not equal, present but not powerful. The position of a claimed individual, neither subject nor ruler. Garrick sat directly across from Kane, his ice-blue eyes finding me immediately. His smile was knife-thin and vicious. "Brothers and sisters," began Alpha Cormac of the Iron Hills, the eldest present, and thus granted the role of speaker. His voice carried the rasp of age, but lost none of its authority. "We gather under ancient law, invoked by Alpha King Kane Ashenblade of the Northern Territories. Kane, state your purpose." Kane rose, and the hall fell silent. Even standing among 11 other alphas, each powerful, each commanding, he dominated the space. "I invoke counsel to address a matter of pack law and moral justice," Kane said, his voice carrying to every corner. "Specifically, the treatment of omegas and the practice of abandonment, which I believe violates the fundamental principles our ancestors established." Murmurs rippled through the assembled wolves. "This is about the refugee," Garrick said, not bothering to stand. "Let's not pretend otherwise. The Northern King stole property from Black Moon Pack, and now seeks to legitimize his theft through political theater." "Property." Kane's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You call a living woman property? I call an Omega who belonged to my pack and fled with a child carrying alpha blood exactly what she is, a thief and a fugitive." Garrick finally stood, his posture relaxed but his eyes cold. "I demand her return under the law of origin, which clearly states that Omegas born to a pack remain bound to that pack unless formally released." "The law of origin also includes provisions for protection," Alpha Mira interjected, her melodic voice cutting through the tension. "An Omega cannot be bound to a pack that fails in its duty of care." "I violated no duty," Garrick said smoothly. "I gave her direct orders as her alpha. She defied them. That is grounds for expulsion, which I exercised. What happened after she left my territory is not my concern." "You ordered her to terminate a healthy pregnancy," Kane said flatly. "When she refused, you exiled her while in labor, knowing she would likely die. That is not leadership, Garrick. That is murder. I ordered her to abort a half-blood child that would have brought chaos to my pack," Garrick corrected. "The father was a rogue alpha, a drifter with no pack ties or honor. Should I have allowed such a child to claim Black Moon resources? To potentially challenge legitimate bloodlines?" "Yes," Kane said simply. "If you were any kind of true alpha, yes." Garrick's expression hardened. Easy words from a man who is himself half-blood. "Tell me, Kane, does your championing of this Omega come from justice, or from seeing your own shameful origins reflected in her bastard child?" The temperature in the hall seemed to drop. Tor's hand moved to his sword, but Kane raised a hand, stopping him. "My origins are well known," Kane said, his voice deadly calm. "I was born to an Omega abandoned by her pack, cast out for carrying a child whose father had no honor. Alpha Aldrich's stone heart could have turned us away. Instead, he showed mercy, gave us sanctuary, and in doing so, he taught me that strength without compassion makes us no better than the beasts we descend from." His golden eyes blazed. "So yes, Garrick, I see my mother in Melva. I see what she could have been if someone had chosen mercy over tradition, and I refuse to repeat the sins of the past." "Sentiment," Garrick sneered. "Weakness dressed in pretty philosophy." "Then let us examine your strength," Alpha Theron rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "You speak of leadership, yet you ordered raids on northern settlements after Kane invoked his legal right to provide sanctuary. 8 dead, dozens wounded. Was that strength, Garrick? Or petulance?" "I was retrieving stolen property." "You were murdering innocent wolves," Theron interrupted. "Farmers, craftsmen, children, all to force the return of one Omega. That doesn't speak to strength. It speaks to obsession." Garrick's jaw clenched, but before he could respond, Alpha Kasha spoke up, her voice sharp and clear. "I think we're missing the larger question. This isn't just about one Omega or one child. It's about the precedent we set." She turned to address the full council. "If we allow Kane to keep this Omega against her Alpha's wishes, we fundamentally alter pack structure. Omegas could flee any discipline, claim sanctuary anywhere, fragment the careful hierarchies we've maintained for centuries. Or, Alpha Mira countered, we acknowledge that those hierarchies were built on the subjugation of half our population. That discipline has often meant abuse, and pack structure has meant treating Omegas as property rather than people. Careful, Mira, Alpha Doran of the Sunset Territories warned. You're advocating revolution. I'm advocating evolution, Mira replied calmly. Our world is changing. We can change with it or cling to traditions until they strangle us. The debate erupted then, alphas arguing over each other, voices rising in passion and fury. I watched it all, feeling simultaneously invisible and hypervisible, knowing that every word spoken was about me, but not to me. Until Alpha Brennan of the Eastern Reach stood.
Brothers and sisters, he said, his weathered face thoughtful. We debate law and tradition, precedent and principle. We speak of this Omega as if she were a theoretical construct. His eyes found mine. But she stands here among us, silent. I propose we hear from her directly. The hall went absolutely still. That's unprecedented, Garrick said, shock evident in his voice. Omegas don't address the council. Why not? Brennan challenged. We're debating her fate. Shouldn't she have voice in it? The laws are clear. The laws, Kane interrupted quietly, say nothing about who may speak at council. Only who may vote. He turned to look at me, and I saw the question in his eyes. The choice. I could stay silent. Let others decide my fate, as Omegas always had. Or I could speak. My legs trembled as I stepped forward, moving to stand in the center of the circle. 12 alphas surrounded me, their power pressing in from all sides. Behind them, dozens of warriors and advisors watched with varying expressions of shock, curiosity, and outrage. Garrick's face had gone purple with fury. You grant an Omega audience, he demanded. This is obscene. She stands claimed by the Northern Crown, Kane said calmly. She has the right to speak in her own defense. I could barely breathe, could barely think past the pounding of my heart. But I thought of Lyra, safe in Ira's care. I thought of all the other Omegas who'd been silenced, discarded, treated as less than fully alive. And I found my voice. My name is Melva, I said, and was shocked by how steady I sounded. I was born to Black Moon Pack. Raised to be obedient, to serve, to accept without question whatever my alpha decreed. I turned slowly, meeting each alpha's gaze in turn. When I became pregnant by a passing alpha, a man who promised me the world and left me with nothing but a growing belly, I knew my pack would be displeased. But I never imagined they would demand I kill my own child. The child was inconvenient, Garrick said coldly. A drain on resources. A potential source of conflict. I gave you a choice, abort or leave. You chose. I chose life, I agreed, turning to face him fully. I chose to value my daughter's existence over your convenience. And for that, you exiled me in the middle of labor, during a blizzard, knowing I would almost certainly die. You defied your alpha. I defied murder. The words burst out of me, loud and fierce. You call it discipline, law, pack structure. But what you ordered me to do was kill an innocent child because her existence inconvenienced you. And when I refused, you sentenced us both to death. Tears streamed down my face, but my voice never wavered. Is that truly the strength you celebrate? The power to kill those weaker than you? To discard lives like broken tools? Silence filled the hall. Absolute and profound. I turned back to the council, addressing them all. I know I'm just an Omega. I know my voice shouldn't matter in these halls of power. But I'm also a mother, fighting to protect my child from a world that sees her as an abomination. The word came out bitter, remembering the nobles who'd whispered it. My daughter is innocent. She didn't choose her father. She didn't choose to be born during a political crisis. She only chose to live. My gaze swept across the alphas. If your laws say that her life is worth less than pack convenience, then your laws are broken. If your traditions demand mothers sacrifice their children to preserve hierarchy, then your traditions deserve to die. I drew a shaking breath. Alpha Kane showed me mercy when he had every reason to walk away. He honored laws that put life above politics. And for that, you call him weak. Sentimental. I looked at Cain then, and couldn't help the love that flooded my expression. I see a king who understands that true strength isn't the power to destroy, but the courage to protect. Not despite the cost, but because of it. I turned back to the council, squared my shoulders, and spoke my final words. You can send me back to Black Moon. You can give Garrick what he wants and call it justice. But know that in doing so, you're not just condemning me. You're telling every Omega in every pack that their lives, their children, their choices, none of it matters. That power will always triumph over mercy. My voice dropped to something raw and pleading. Or you can choose differently. You can acknowledge that laws built on cruelty don't deserve preservation. That strength tempered by compassion is the only strength worth having. Please, I whispered. Choose mercy. If not for me, then for every Omega who will come after me. Every mother who will face the same impossible choice. Be the leaders our ancestors hoped you would become. I stepped back, trembling violently, and Cain's hand immediately found mine, steadying me. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then Alpha Mira stood. I call for a vote, she said quietly. On the matter before us, should the council uphold Alpha Garrick's claim and demand Melva's return to Black Moon, or should we affirm Cain's sanctuary and, she paused, choosing her words carefully, consider reform of laws regarding Omega treatment and abandonment? You can't be serious, Garrick snarled. One Omega sob story and you're ready to overturn centuries. I'm ready to acknowledge that centuries of tradition have resulted in countless preventable deaths, Mira interrupted. That we've maintained power through subjugation and called it natural order. She looked at me, and her expression held respect. This Omega spoke truth. Our laws are broken. The question is whether we have the courage to fix them. The River Pack votes for reform, she declared. The Mountain Guard concurs, Theron added, standing. What Garrick did was shameful. We should not reward it. One by one, the Alphas declared their positions. Some stood for reform, Kasha of the Wildwood, Brennan of the Eastern Reach, two others whose names I barely registered through my shock and hope. Others stood against, Doran of Sunset, two of the Southern Alphas who saw any change as weakness. And some abstained, unable or unwilling to commit. When the count finished, Alpha Cormac looked around the circle gravely. 6 votes for reform and affirmation of sanctuary. 5 against. 1 abstention. He paused, letting the weight of it settle. The motion carries. The hall erupted. Voices raised in triumph and outrage, wolves howling their approval or fury. I stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. We'd won. By the narrowest possible margin, we'd won. Cormac raised his hands, calling for order. When silence finally fell, he spoke with the authority of centuries. Let it be recorded and proclaimed across all territories. The Council of 12 Alphas has voted to affirm the Northern Crown's sanctuary of the Omega Melva and her daughter Lyra. Furthermore, his voice carried over the renewed murmurs, we decree that the practice of Omega abandonment is hereby outlawed. Any Alpha who exiles an Omega without providing safe alternative placement will face Council sanction. This is madness. Garrick roared. You're destroying everything. We're evolving, Mira said calmly. As we must or perish. The vote is concluded, Cormac said firmly. Melva and her child remain under Northern Crown protection. Alpha Garrick, you have no legal claim. The matter is settled. You think you've won, he said, his voice low and venomous. You think your little speech changed anything. But all you've done is paint a target on yourself. On your bastard child. His smile was cruel. Laws can be changed again. Council votes can shift. And when they do, I'll be waiting. He turned that hatred on Cain. You've started a war, Ashenblade. Not with swords and soldiers, but with ideology. The old Alphas, the traditional packs, they won't accept this. You've fractured our unity over an Omega's tears. He leaned forward. You'll regret this rebellion. Both of you. Mark my words. Then he swept from the hall, his delegation following. The great doors slammed behind them with a boom that echoed like thunder. The remaining Alphas began to disperse, some congratulating Cain, others leaving in stony silence. I stood in the center of the hall, still processing what had happened. We'd won. We'd actually won. Alpha Mira approached, her expression warm. That was bravely done, child. Foolish perhaps, but brave. Thank you, I managed. For your vote. Thank your Alpha King, she interrupted gently. He's the one who risked everything to call us here. Who staked his reputation on this fight. She glanced at Cain, who was speaking with Theron. Love him well. Men like that are rare. After she left, Tor appeared at my side, grinning fiercely. You know you just made history, right? First Omega to address the council. First to directly influence their vote. The bards are going to sing about this. Or curse it, I said shakily. Probably both. His grin faded. Garrick meant what he said. This isn't over. I know. Cain finally extricated himself from the other alphas and came to me. Without a word, he pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. You were magnificent, he murmured into my hair. Terrifying and magnificent. I was terrified, I admitted. I know. That's what made it magnificent. He pulled back to look at me, his golden eyes blazing with pride and love and something that looked like awe. You changed the world today, Melva. You know that, right? Those words you spoke, they'll echo across every territory. Every Omega who's ever been silenced heard them. We changed it, I corrected. You called the council. You gave me the platform. You found the courage to use it. His hand cupped my face. I love you. Have I mentioned that today? Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the uncertain future, I laughed. Not in the last few hours. Unforgivable. I love you, Melva. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. Cain. Whatever I was going to say was lost as his mouth found mine. The kiss was gentle and fierce, promise and celebration, everything we'd fought for distilled into a single perfect moment. When we broke apart, I saw Ira waiting at the edge of the hall, Lyra in her arms. My daughter was awake, her amber gold eyes bright and curious. Cain and I walked to them together, and when Ira transferred Lyra to my arms, the weight of her felt like absolution. Like hope. Welcome to the new world, little one, Cain murmured, his finger tracing her soft cheek. One where you'll grow up free. Where your voice will matter. Where you'll never have to fight just to exist. Lyra cooed, grasping his finger with surprising strength. And standing there in the great hall of stones, with my daughter in my arms and the man I loved beside me, I looked toward the future. It wouldn't be easy. Garrick's threats weren't empty. There would be resistance, possibly violence, as traditional packs fought against change. But we'd won the first battle. We'd proven that mercy and strength could coexist. That voices long silenced could still speak truth to power. The revolution had begun. And whatever came next, we would face it together. The Council of 12 dispersed as the sun set, each alpha returning to their territories to grapple with what had been decided. Some would embrace the changes. Others would resist. But the vote had been cast. The decree issued. The world was changing. And for the first time in my life, I believed I might actually survive to see what it became. The fortress felt different in the days following the council. Not quieter, if anything, it buzzed with more activity than ever. Messengers arrived hourly with reports from across the territories. Some packs had embraced the reforms immediately, declaring new protections for their omegas. Others simmered with resentment, their alphas sending carefully worded letters that barely concealed their fury. But there was a change in the air itself. A sense of something fundamental shifting, like the first crack in winter ice that heralds spring's inevitable arrival. I spent those days in a haze of exhaustion and wonder, still processing what had happened. The vote. My speech. The reality that I had stood before the most powerful wolves in existence and demanded they see me as more than property. And they had listened. Not all of them. Not even most. But enough. 6 votes, I murmured to Lyra as I nursed her in my chambers, watching snow fall beyond the window. 6 alphas who chose mercy over tradition. Is that victory or just postponement? Lyra's only answer was to grip my finger tighter, her amber gold eyes fixed on my face with that uncanny awareness she seemed to possess. At 2.5 months, she was already so alert, so present. Ira said it was unusual for one so young, but then again, nothing about Lyra's existence had been usual. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, already knowing who it would be. Cain entered, and my breath caught as it always did. He wasn't wearing armor today, just simple leather and wool, his dark hair loose around his shoulders. Without the crown and formal trappings, he looked younger. Almost vulnerable. "I thought I might find you here," he said, closing the door behind him. "Hiding from the celebrations?" I smiled ruefully. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to me." He crossed to the window, standing close enough that I could feel his warmth. "The court has been asking for you. They want to see the Omega who changed the world." "I didn't change anything," I protested. "I just spoke. You're the one who—" "Melva." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "You need to understand what you did. For centuries, Omegas have been silent in our halls of power. Invisible except when being discussed or traded or disciplined. And you stood in the center of the Council of 12 and demanded they see you as an equal. As a person worthy of voice." His hand cupped my cheek. "That's not just speaking. That's revolution." "A revolution that barely passed," I reminded him. 6-5. One vote and we would have lost everything. But we didn't lose. His thumb traced my cheekbone. "That's what matters. We won. And that victory will echo across generations." I leaned into his touch, savoring the simple comfort of it. "Garrick won't accept this. You know that, right? He'll find ways to undermine the reforms, to turn other alphas against us." "Let him try." Cain's voice held that edge of steel I'd come to recognize. "He threatened you in front of the entire council. Promised revenge. That was his mistake." His eyes blazed gold. "I am." He sat beside me on the window seat, careful not to jostle Lyra. "Because we didn't just win a vote, Melva. We won the moral argument. Even the alphas who voted against reform couldn't deny the truth of your words. They can resist, they can delay, but they can't unsee what we showed them." "Which is?" "That strength and compassion aren't opposites. That protecting the vulnerable doesn't make us weak, it makes us worthy of the power we hold." He looked down at Lyra, who had finished nursing and was drowsing contentedly. "May I?" I transferred her to his arms, watching as he cradled her with that same gentle reverence that never failed to make my chest ache. He was so careful with her, this warrior king who could break stone with his bare hands. With Lyra, he moved like she was made of spun glass and starlight. "Hello, little warrior," he murmured, his finger tracing her tiny nose. "Are you causing trouble for your mother?" Lyra yawned, a sound so small and perfect it made us both smile. "She's perfect," Cain said softly. "Like her mother." "I'm not perfect," I protested. "I'm terrified most of the time. Exhausted. Completely overwhelmed by everything that's happened." "Perfect," he repeated firmly. "Perfection isn't the absence of fear. It's having the courage to act despite it." His eyes met mine. "You've been brave since the moment I met you. Bleeding and in labor, fighting to bring life into a world that had condemned you both. That's not weakness, Melva. That's the kind of strength empires should be built on." The weight of his words, the intensity in his gaze, it was too much. I looked away, blinking back sudden tears. "Hey." His hand found mine, lacing our fingers together. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything." I laughed shakily. "I keep waiting for this to end. For someone to realize there's been a mistake, that an Omega like me doesn't belong in a place like this, with someone like you." "Melva, look at me." He waited until I met his eyes. "You belong here. You belong with me. Not because some law says so, not because I claimed you in front of witnesses, but because I love you. Because when I imagine my future, you're in every version of it. You and Lyra both." His voice roughened with emotion. "You're my partner in this. Not my ward, not my responsibility. My equal. My choice. Cain. I mean it." He shifted Lyra carefully into the crook of one arm, freeing his other hand to cup my face. "I know the claim I made was partly political. A way to protect you under law. But the truth is, I wanted to claim you long before politics demanded it. I wanted to stand before the world and say she's mine, and I'm hers, and anyone who has a problem with that can face me. Tears spilled down my cheeks. You really love me. Not just the idea of me or what I represent, but me. Every stubborn, brave, beautiful part of you, he confirmed. His forehead rested against mine. I love the way you fight for your daughter. The way you found courage to speak when every instinct probably screamed at you to stay silent. I love your compassion and your strength and the way you see the world, not as it is, but as it should be. His breath mingled with mine. I love you, Melva. Completely. Irrevocably. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it. I love you too, I whispered. So much it terrifies me. Because I've never had anything good that wasn't taken away. And you're everything. What if? No. He kissed me softly, silencing the fear. No what ifs. No catastrophizing. We're here. We're together. We won. Let that be enough for now. I kissed him back, pouring all my love and fear and hope into it. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, Lyra made a small sound of protest at being squished between us. We laughed, the tension breaking like spring thaw. Come on, Kane said, standing with Lyra still cradled against his chest. There's something I want to show you. He led me through the fortress, down corridors I'd walked 100 times and others I'd never seen. We passed celebrating wolves who bowed respectfully, to both of us, I noticed with shock. Not just their king, but his claimed Omega as well. Finally, we emerged into the northern gardens. I'd walked these paths many times in the past weeks, finding solace in the stark beauty of winter roses and snow-laden evergreens. But I'd never seen them like this, at dusk with lanterns being lit throughout the space, their warm glow transforming ice and stone into something magical. It's beautiful, I breathed. Wait, Kane said, a smile playing at his lips. As full darkness fell, I heard singing. Voices rising from throughout the fortress and the grounds beyond, wolves lifting their voices in harmony beneath the emerging stars. It wasn't the hunting songs I'd heard in Black Moon, all aggression and dominance. This was something else. Something ancient and hopeful. What are they singing? I asked. The Song of Renewal, Kane explained, shifting Lyra so I could see her face. It's only sung when something fundamental changes in the pack. The last time was when Aldrich took the throne, 300 years ago. The voices swelled, and I caught fragments of the words, something about dawn breaking, about chains falling, about new paths forged under the moon's blessing. They were singing about us. About the reforms. About hope. They're celebrating, I whispered, awed. They're believing, Kane corrected, in the possibility of something better. Something more just. He turned to face me fully. You gave them that, Melva. You and your courage. I wanted to argue, to deflect, but the sincerity in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I moved closer, resting my head against his shoulder, Lyra warm between us. We stood like that as the song swelled and faded, as the moon rose over the mountains, as the world we'd fought for slowly came into focus. What happens now? I asked quietly. Now we rebuild. Kane's arm wrapped around my waist, holding me close. We implement the reforms. We support packs that embrace change and pressure those that resist. We create systems to protect Omegas, to give them voice and choice. He paused. And we raise your daughter in a world that sees her as the miracle she is, not an inconvenience to be discarded. Our daughter, I corrected softly. He went very still. What? I pulled back to look at him, my heart hammering. I know you're not her father by blood. I know she's technically just my daughter, legally yours only through claim. But, I swallowed hard. If you want to be her father in truth, not just law, I would like that. She would like that. The expression that crossed his face was pure wonder. You mean that? I've watched you with her. The way you hold her, talk to her, look at her like she's precious beyond measure. You love her. And she, my voice caught. She knows you. Even at 2 months old, she knows your scent, your voice. She calms when you hold her. That's not nothing, Kane. That's family. Our daughter, he repeated, testing the words. Then louder, with absolute certainty, our daughter. He kissed me then, deep and thorough and full of promises. Lyra squirmed between us, making indignant sounds until we broke apart, laughing. "Sorry, little one," Cain murmured, adjusting his hold on her. "Your parents got distracted." Your parents. The words settled over me like a blessing. We walked deeper into the gardens, following paths lit by lanterns and moonlight. The singing continued, a constant backdrop of hope and renewal. Other wolves passed us, some stopping to bow, others simply smiling with genuine warmth. "They've accepted us," I said, surprised. "Most of them," Cain agreed. "There are still those who resent the changes, who see your presence as a threat to tradition. But they're outnumbered now. And as more packs implement reforms, as more Omegas find their voices, that resentment will fade." He paused at a stone bench. "Sit with me." I settled beside him, Lyra now nestled in my arms, her eyes beginning to flutter closed. The moon was full overhead, painting everything in silver light. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Cain asked. "That first night, in the cabin?" I thought back to that desperate, pain-filled encounter. I said a lot of things. Most of them probably incoherent. "You said, please help her. Not me, her." His voice was quiet. "Even dying, even in agony, your first thought was your daughter's survival. Not your own." "She was innocent," I said simply. "I'd made my choices. But she deserved a chance. And now she has one." Cain's finger traced Lyra's cheek. "Because of you. Because of the stand you took, the words you spoke, the courage you found." He looked at me. "I sought justice, Melva. I've spent my whole reign trying to build a kingdom based on fairness and law. But you gave it soul. You reminded all of us that laws mean nothing if they lack compassion. That justice without mercy is still tyranny." The words echoed something we discussed before, in fragments and half-conversations. Now they felt complete. Final. And mercy without power? I asked softly, remembering our earlier exchange. He smiled. "Hope." We sat in comfortable silence, watching our daughter sleep, listening to our people sing of renewal and change. The future stretched before us, uncertain, dangerous, full of challenges we couldn't yet imagine. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Because I wasn't facing it alone. Lyra stirred in my arms, her eyes fluttering open. In the moonlight, I could see them clearly, that striking amber gold that marked her as something special. But as I watched, I noticed something new. Flecks of blue shimmered in her irises, dancing like starlight on water. "Cain, look," I breathed. He leaned closer, studying our daughter's eyes. "Blue and gold," he murmured. "I've never seen that combination before." "What does it mean?" "I don't know." His voice held wonder. "But it's beautiful. Like she carries both moon and sun in her gaze." Lyra looked between us, her expression solemn and knowing in that unsettling way babies sometimes managed. Then she smiled, her first real smile, and my heart cracked open with love. "She's going to change the world," I said with absolute certainty. "She already has," Cain replied. "Just by existing. Just by surviving." He wrapped his arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "And we're going to make sure she grows up in a world worthy of her." Thunder rumbled in the distance, and I tensed instinctively, memories of that first storm flooding back. "It's all right," Cain murmured. "Listen." I forced myself to focus, to really hear. The thunder was low, distant, not the violent crashing that had accompanied my flight. This was different. Gentler. Like the earth itself was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. "No storm coming," Cain said. "Just the sound of winter breaking. Spring announcing its arrival." "A bit early for spring," I pointed out. "Maybe." His smile was soft. "Or maybe the world is shifting faster than we realized. Changing whether it's ready or not." We stayed in the gardens until Lyra grew fussy, demanding to be fed. As we walked back to the fortress, wolves continued to sing, their voices rising to the stars. In our chambers, I nursed Lyra while Cain lit the fire, building it up until the room glowed with warmth. When Lyra finally fell into deep sleep, he took her gently and placed her in the cradle beside our bed. Our bed. When had I started thinking of it that way? Cain returned to me, his hands settling on my waist. "Stay with me," he said quietly. Not as my ward or my claimed Omega or any legal designation. Just stay. Because I love you and I can't imagine my life without you in it. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. This is home now. Your home. He kissed me then, and it was different from all the kisses before. This one held promise. Permanence. The beginning of everything we'd fought to protect. We made love slowly, carefully, mindful of my still healing body. It was gentle and intense, every touch a declaration, every sigh a vow. And when we finally lay tangled together, sated and peaceful, I felt something settle deep in my soul. Belonging. I belonged here, in this room, in this fortress, in this kingdom we were rebuilding together. I belonged with Cain, this scarred warrior king who'd chosen mercy over tradition. I belonged with Lyra, my miracle daughter who would grow up free. I simply belonged. What are you thinking? Cain murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. That I'm happy, I said, surprised by the truth of it. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely happy. Good. He pulled me closer, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. Get used to it. I plan on making you happy for the rest of our lives. That's a bold promise. I'm a bold king. His hand settled over mine, fingers lacing together. Besides, I have help. Our daughter is going to keep both of us on our toes. I laughed softly, glancing at Lyra's cradle where she slept peacefully. She's going to be extraordinary. I do. He shifted to look at me, his golden eyes intense. Because she'll have you as her mother. And you're going to teach her everything you learned, about courage, about fighting for what's right, about finding strength in impossible situations. He kissed my forehead. She's going to be unstoppable. We'll make her that way, I corrected. Together. Together, he agreed. Outside, the singing finally faded, but the sense of celebration lingered. Through the window, I could see the moon hanging full and bright over the mountains, its light painting everything silver. Beneath that glacial moon, I'd fled into a storm, desperate and dying, fighting for my daughter's life with the last of my strength. That moon had witnessed my darkest moment, my most desperate prayer. Now it witnessed my triumph, my healing, my hope. Thunder rumbled again, distant, gentle, carrying no threat. Just the sound of winter releasing its grip, of ice beginning to crack, of new life stirring beneath frozen ground. Dawn was breaking. Not the sudden, violent dawn of storm and crisis, but the slow, inevitable dawn of change spreading across a world ready, finally ready, to embrace it. I thought of the territories beyond our borders, of Omegas who would hear about what happened at the council. Some would take courage from my example. Others would demand their own voices be heard. The reforms we'd passed were just the beginning, seeds planted in fertile ground, waiting to bloom. It wouldn't be easy. Garrick and others like him would resist, would fight to preserve the old ways. There would be setbacks and struggles, moments of doubt and fear. But we'd proven something crucial. Change was possible. That voices long silenced could still speak truth to power. That mercy and strength could coexist. We'd proven that love, in all its forms, was worth fighting for. I love you, I whispered to Cain, to this moment, to the future unfurling before us. I love you too, he murmured back. Now sleep. Tomorrow we begin rebuilding the world. I closed my eyes, safe in his arms, listening to Lyra's soft breathing and the distant sound of spring's approach. Tomorrow would bring challenges, conflicts, the hard work of transforming ideals into reality. But tonight, we had one. Tonight, we were together. Tonight, hope was enough. I drifted into sleep with a smile on my lips, dreaming of the world we were creating, one where strength served compassion, where power protected the vulnerable, where every voice mattered. Where Omegas walked free. Where children like Lyra could grow up unashamed. Where mercy was no longer weakness, but the highest form of strength. The dawn was breaking. And we would be there to greet it. Together. In the years that followed, the reforms spread like wildfire across the territories. Some packs embraced them immediately. Others resisted until their own Omegas demanded change. Slowly, inevitably, the old ways crumbled. Lyra grew up in a world transformed, not perfect but better. She learned to fight and to speak, to lead and to listen. Her eyes, blue gold and unique, became a symbol of the unity her very existence represented. And when she was old enough to understand, her parents told her the story of the night she was born. Of the storm and the cabin, the desperation and the mercy, the courage it took to demand the world see you as worthy. You changed everything just by surviving, Kane told her. Never forget that. Your life matters. Your voice matters. And anyone who tries to tell you otherwise has to answer to me. Melva just smiled and added, and to yourself. Because you're your own greatest defender, little one. Never forget that either. Beneath the same moon that had witnessed her birth, Lyra listened and understood. She was the child of revolution, the daughter of mercy and strength. And she would carry that legacy forward, into a future bright with possibility. The dawn had broken, and it would never set again.